Well, good morning, Homestead family. I've had some subscribers reaching out to me in the comments asking me, why in the world do you grow vegetables in containers when you have a 5-acre garden complex? You know what? That's a pretty good question. I think that'll be the topic of today's video. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, friends. I just wanted to walk you through real quick the different size containers that I use here commonly on our homestead, and I can grow pretty much anything I want in these various size containers. And just let me walk you through them real quick. This is my seed starting cup right here. This is what I start all my seeds in, and after they get germinated and get up a couple, 2 or 3 weeks old, I will either step them up or plant them out directly into the garden. If I step it up, I'll step it up into a 4-inch cup like this one here, which I can put on a grow out table and let it grow for a while. And once it gets a little bit bigger and a really robust root system, I'll go ahead and plant it in containers or directly out into the earth bed itself. This is my 6-inch container. I use this on various vegetables that are, going to be kind of small, not going to be a very big plant, and not going to have a very big root system. This is a common container here. It is called a 1-gallon container. I use this for several things, stepping up plants as well as growing some vegetables in there for the life of the plant. For example, lettuce. Here's a 2-gallon bucket, and this one I use for some small vegetables or some large lettuce. For example, my Salanova butterhead lettuce, I like to grow in a 2-gallon container because, the bouquet is about the size of the size of the container, so it grows a perfect bouquet of that Salanova greenhead lettuce in there. This is a very common container, 3-gallon. It's very versatile, can be used for many different plants, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Here is a 5-gallon bucket, a common 5-gallon bucket. It comes in handy for lots of good things to grow, and easy to grow in a 5-gallon bucket, and is readily available anywhere. This is my 15-gallon container. I use it in some vegetables, for example, potatoes or something that's going to get pretty big, that a big broccoli or something like that. You could go up into a 15. You can grow a broccoli in a 5 just as well. Sometimes I put them in here, depending on how many I'm trying to grow. And here is my 20-gallon container. This is one that I use commonly for growing potatoes in buckets. Y'all have all seen those videos a dozen times, but that's my 20-gallon container. So let me show you the most common ones that you can probably use in your garden for pretty much anything. The 1-gallon container is a very common use. It can be used for lettuce and things like that, radishes, anything that's got a small root system, that you could use a 1-gallon with no problem. This is your most versatile container in the garden. This is a 3-gallon container. The other one, the most popular one in the garden, is the 5-gallon bucket. Now, these 3 right here can grow a tremendous amount of vegetables. As you know, a vegetable root system is, on average about 9 to 12 inches deep. So when you get ready to grow any kind of vegetable in your garden in the container, you want to visualize the root ball and the root system on that container. If you think of a radish, you've got the little radish bulb and a little taproot off of the bottom of the radish, and that's really only about 5 or 6 inches deep. This 1-gallon container could grow 5 or 6 little radishes in there. So you want to choose a container. What I usually use as a rule of thumb is the size of the root ball, and I want to double that with the container. So if the root ball's about 6 inches deep, I want to, about an 8 or 9 inch container, deep container, or even as much as 12, but no less than 9. So that right there is pretty versatile for a lot of small things, lettuce especially. This 3-gallon container, I can grow a lot of different things in here. Bok choy, Kachimsi greens, all kinds of things will grow in a 3-gallon container easily. And you'll see on our channel, we have several videos showing us using these 3 gallons. 5-gallon bucket is another beauty. You can see it's pretty deep, so if you got a 12-inch plant, 12-inch root ball plant, I really still have about twice the root ball. So this right here I can use for broccoli, cauliflower, peppers, anything like that. This is great for little patio tomatoes and things like that. This is great for bigger plants, when you get up into your brassicas and stuff like that, or potatoes. You can grow a little 5-gallon bucket full of potatoes. If you like the small new potatoes, this is perfect for. But these are the containers, and I just wanted to walk out here into the container garden itself, and let's just take a look at some of the things we're growing out here, and maybe we can discuss some of the reasons why I grow in container instead of putting it out in the earth bed. Let's check it out. One of the various reasons I use containers to grow certain vegetables is I can use an elevated table, such as this 3-gallon container table that I've built. This is a grow rack. We have this video on our channel if you want to do this yourself at home. They're very simple to build, and if you have a grow table for yourself to grow your containers on, it's easy on your back. It's very senior citizen friendly, and that is a good reason to try to consider using containers, because you can elevate them up off the ground so you're not on your hands and knees when you're trying to maintain or harvest your plants. So an elevated table is another good reason that I use the containers. It's because I can make it a little easier on my back in my older age. Another factor that I consider whenever I'm making a decision on if I'm going to grow it in the earth bed or if I'm going to grow it in containers is the type of plant that I'm growing. What is it prone to with insect and disease activity? For example, these are bok choy, and I guess everybody knows that bok choy are absolutely slug magnets. They draw back slugs on them terribly. And I used to grow these in the ground, and I would struggle with them things, trying to use diatomaceous earth around them and just constantly fighting with the slugs. And most of the time, the slugs would win. But when I built these tables and I started putting them in 3-gallon containers, which is the perfect size for a bok choy, and I elevated up them off the ground, my slug problem disappeared. So that is another thing to consider, is what kind of insect activity are you suffering with if you're trying to grow it in the ground. Remember, when you have things growing in the ground, there's a lot more insect activity down on the ground where they can, thrive as compared to up in the air like this. So it does greatly reduce them some. I'm not saying that you're not going to get away from flying insects and things like that, but the stuff that dwells in the ground and the creepy crawly things that want to get in your vegetables, and lifting them up off the table will greatly reduce that. Another reason I like to use containers on some vegetables is they are 99% weed-free. So the maintenance on taking care of your containers is almost zero. So if you do, once in a while you'll get a little straggler of a little weed pop up in there, and you can just pick it out real quick like that and just throw it away and you're done. That's a lot easier than being on your hands and knees for several hours. Another common problem all of us gardeners have always faced, no matter if you're living in a suburban setting or a rural setting like us, is you're going to have yard bunnies if you have a garden. Yard bunnies are everywhere. They can even survive and thrive in your yard and your shrubbery out in front of your house, and you would never even know they're there. But the The yard bunny will decimate your little garden if he gets going on it. So another reason to have your plants elevated like this is a bunny will not climb. So if you have it at least 24 inches up off the ground, he's not going to mess with it. So elevating your plants can greatly reduce damage from Mr. Rabbit. Another good candidate for containers is lettuce. Nancy and I have grown lettuce for years, and for many years I grew lettuce out in the ground, in the earth bed. And what happens is when it rains heavily or you irrigate, what happens is you get some splash up from the soil, from you know, the rain hitting the ground and splashing the dirt and grit up into the lettuce. And then when you harvest the lettuce, it's a difficult job to get that thing thoroughly cleaned, which means you have to rinse it multiple times, soak it. It's just a big job to have to do that you really don't have to. There's nothing worse than biting into a beautiful lettuce salad and it be gritty, you know. So what we do is we grow all of our lettuce in a little 6-inch cups, and it's a perfect size container for it because it's not a very deep rooted plant. I have it elevated off of the table, off the ground on a grow table, so it's away from the rabbits and it's away from the majority of the insect activity. People ask me, what do you use on all your lettuce to keep everything off of it? I don't use any pesticide or spray at all, none. All this lettuce grows just fine up off the ground on a grow table in a container. So it's easy to maintain it. I don't have to worry about weeds. When I get ready to harvest it, it's very simple to come out and harvest. I don't have to crawl around on my hands and knees, and you can just pick what you want and go rinse it off, a quick rinse, and you know, pretty much it's ready to go. If this was grown in the ground, it would be, you know, a lot of labor involved trying to get the grit out of it. But this right here is the way to go with lettuce. Something else to consider when you're thinking about growing a container garden is how are you going to harvest and how much are you going to harvest. In a lot of cases, when we're harvesting, we just want to harvest enough for a meal for that night. We don't want to come out here and get a whole bunch of high yield vegetable harvest and try to cook it the same day. It's so convenient. You know, like we say, well, we want a lettuce for a salad, and get some onions, you know, to throw in there, and I need a few little onions for cooking, and maybe some potatoes to go with it. And what Nancy can do, or myself, is we can come out here and we can harvest off a couple of these little 6-inch cups of lettuce, and maybe grab up one of these 1-gallon containers of bunching onions, and we harvest those, and we go over and dump out a 5-gallon bucket of potatoes, and we get, you know, 2 or 3 pounds of the little new potatoes that are small and very tasty. And that way we can let things continue to grow out here and harvest it daily. And if it's easy to harvest and easy to come and get, you don't have to get all hot and sweaty. You're not crawling around on your hands and knees. It's all on elevated tables. I can get 1, 2, 3, 4 ingredients and run in, or Nancy, and cook it that night for supper. Oh baby, ain't nothing more tasty than something that's been grown and harvested and cooked the same day. And it's a good way to stretch out your yield. You can harvest these every day or every couple of days, and that'll last for several weeks. If I was growing this in the ground, it'd be harder to do, and I'd end up going out and harvesting a whole bunch of it at one time and trying to keep it in the refrigerator. It's just not easy to do. So that's another reason that you might want to consider when you're thinking about a container garden is, can I just harvest a little bit at a time and go along and stretch it out? Here's an example of a vegetable that grows just as good in a 5-gallon bucket as it does out in an earth bed. We've grown it both ways. So this is a Napa cabbage. Nancy likes this when she makes her Korean kimchi, and the woman loves her kimchi. So I've grown this in the vegetable garden earth bed before. It gets just as pretty and beautiful heads, but it's very difficult to get the grit out of it and get it clean, and it's usually got a lot of insect activity associated with it, and a lot of the leaves lay and touch the earth, the ground, which causes them to start developing disease problems and rot, and it's a little bit more difficult to grow. But when I put them in a 5-gallon bucket, the root ball will eventually pretty much fill up that 5-gallon bucket by the time it's ready to harvest. But the beautiful thing about it is it's totally clean. Very little rinsing has to be done. So when she comes out and harvests this, she cuts that head of that cabbage out of there. It's a quick rinse, really. It's not a really burdensome job to do. It's easy to get to. It's in the buckets, and we got them on these 5-gallon bucket racks, container grow tables here. We do have a video on our channel on how to build these container racks for your 5-gallon buckets if you want to do one for yourself. So check that video out. But these racks hold the buckets well. When they're not susceptible to being turned over into wind. They're elevated up off the ground a little bit, which makes harvesting easy, as well as weed control and watering. But the main reason that we elected to go with this is the ease of cleaning this and getting it ready for her to use in her kimchi, because that kimchi, it really needs to be perfectly clean to be just right, you know. So having it in this bucket eliminates 99.9% of that grit that gets in there. So when that thing's harvested, it's ready to go just about. So that's another reason to consider. Something else to consider when you're growing plants in a container is the amount of fertilizer that you're going to be needing. In this case, these are some Asian spinach. It's called kachimsi. We've grown this before in the ground as well as in the containers, and I found it much easier to do in the containers, you know, for all the reasons we've already discussed, but also with the fertilizing. When I add the bone meal or the blood meal in the pot, it's contained in a tight, confined area instead of having to try to go and apply fertilizer for a long row. It's much less and more economical to put just a little bit of fertilizer right where I need it in the container with the plant. I don't lose that fertilizer, and that plant usually can go the entire life cycle of that plant on my initial fertilizing when I plant it. So that's another good reason to consider when you're choosing what plants you want to plant in containers. Another great benefit is you can move containers around to suit weather conditions. We grew these this fall, and we've had 2 hurricanes come through just since I've started these plants. So when they were in the seed starters trays, we had to move them all inside. That was the first hurricane that came by. The second hurricane came by. I had just stepped them up into these little 2-gallon little buckets here, and we had to take them all and put them back in the shop, and they had to stay in there for 3 days until you know, Hurricane Nicole came by, and we got that one out of here. So we just got them back out on the grow table, and you know, no damage, everything's 100%, and that was due to being able to move them around. Another thing is when I'm starting my fall vegetables, the time of the year down here in Florida when I have to start my seeds, it's pretty hot. And by the time those seeds get ready to be transplanted out into the garden, it could still linger. The temperatures are coming down pretty good, but you know, you could bump right back up into the 90s for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and that's not uncommon. So having something that's delicate like this, I can have it, you know, that's real sensitive to heat, such as spinach. I have them in the containers, and I can get them out here in the mornings, and I can water them. And if I see some hot days coming, I move these over to an area that's more shady. I've got some shady areas over here. I can put them under the salad bar, under the 40% shade cloth. I can move these around to suit weather conditions. So that's a great benefit of having some plants in containers, is you can roll with the punches. Something else to consider about container garden is when you go to water your plants, it's very easy to control the amount of water that you're giving it and where you're directing that water. As you can see right here, I'm just going right around the edge of the pot, and I'm not hitting the leaves at all. And I can tell how much water I'm getting in there, and I can easily come out each morning. I stick my hand in here and I feel how wet and moist that soil is, and I can tell if I need to add a little more or a little less. So being able to control the water in these containers is vital. It's a good reason to be thinking about when you're doing container gardening. Well, I hope our little video today answered a couple of questions for you about why I use containers when I have 5 acres to work with. I'm still putting things in small pots and growing them. It's got some benefits, and I think that might be something you may want to consider. And there's something else to consider. A lot of folks just simply don't have a yard. You know, they want to grow a garden, and they live in a small duplex or something, and all they have really is a patio. Or some folks that have watched our channel, they live in an apartment and all they have is a patio, and they're able to grow things in containers on their patio or their balcony and enjoy some gardening, living without a yard. So that's something to keep in mind. Is container garden is very versatile. It gives everybody a chance to grow something, and I think it's just a good way to add a little something extra to your gardening experience if you're not already doing so. So I hope that our video today helped some of you folks, and maybe even brought a smile to your face and some peace to your day. So until me and Nancy see y'all next time in the garden, always remember, by his hands we are fed. Give us, Lord, our daily bread. Amen.
Have a blessed day.